nerds, what's up? So I was realizing that most of the perspective on this channel about Wheel of Time has been from a book reader, and most of the people in my comments have also read the books. And I thought it would be interesting to get more neutral opinions about the Wheel of Time show. So I interviewed 3 of my friends and family to kind of get their thoughts on the Wheel of Time from the perspective of not having read the book. So I have 2 people who are big fantasy readers but did not read Wheel of Time yet. In one person's case, they watched the whole show without reading it. And in the other person's case, they watched half the show, read The Eye of the World, and then finished the show. And then finally, I have somebody who never really reads fantasy, but watches a lot of fantasy shows and plays a lot of fantasy video games. So I feel like that's 3 unique perspectives that differ, and we might learn something about the show in the process. A quick note before we jump into the interviews: these are all of my real life friends, and none of them have like booktubes. They're not on social media in that way, so be nice. I'm gonna be heavily moderating this comment section. If you're a jerk to my friends, I will be deleting your comments without any second thought. I usually don't delete any comments, but I don't really care if you're mean to me. I do care if you're mean to my friends. So if you want to disagree with them, that's fine. Keep it cordial. Keep it nice. I am gonna moderate. Also, if you want more content from new Wheel of Time book readers on the show, you can also check out the live show I did with Read by Andy up here. We had a great talk. Her whole Discord hadn't really read Wheel of Time, and so they were all reading it together. So it's a good perspective from a lot of people who are new to the book and new to the show at the same time. So without further ado, we'll get into the interviews after the jump. Hello, this is my friend Brandon, I have to do it this way, who I have known for several years. We met in college, and we've also been in a D&D campaign for 5 years together. So that's, nerdy and legit. Brandon, why don't you tell everyone what you feel like your relationship is to fantasy?
I love fantasy. I feel like, growing up, I always played fantasy video games, Final Fantasy and all of that. Grew up reading fantasy. Didn't like anything we read in school, but I always loved reading on my own when I could go and pick out whatever books I wanted. I think the earliest fantasy-ish book that I remember reading was probably like Redwall or something like that.
Yeah, classic.
And Harry Potter and Sword of Shannara. And in college, I found Brandon Sanderson, and that's sort of the kick that I've been on since college, is reading Brandon Sanderson and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you actually introduced me and Zach to Brandon Sanderson, so that's also your claim to fame, I guess. Now that I have a channel that's like talking about Sanderson. I had read Wheel of Time, so technically I had read Sanderson before, but you were the one who gave us the illegal downloads of Mistborn.
I don't know if you want to say that.
I do want to say it because you guys can look at my shelf and how much money I have given Brandon Sanderson. So like, I have no regrets.
It's funny. It's this like pass along sort of thing, because I got like the ebook to Mistborn from another friend of mine.
So I actually told Brandon he wasn't allowed to read Wheel of Time yet, because you were going to read it because of the show, right? You were thinking of picking it up.
I was. I actually, my wife reads a ton, and I was going to have her check out the book at the library, and she couldn't find it because everybody wants to read it around then. So it's a happy circumstance that I wasn't able to read it, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, well, I just said you couldn't read it till after I talked to you, mostly. I am excited for him to read it, but just not yet. I mean, I can send you one of our copies. So you will read it. So basically, with someone who reads a lot of fantasy, knows how fantasy should work, but hasn't read Wheel of Time, what did you overall think of the show as a show?
So overall, it was entertaining. The show was very entertaining, and I will, probably continue watching it because it was entertaining enough. I probably wouldn't say it was like, it's nowhere near as good as like Game of Thrones, like the initial seasons of Game of Thrones were. We don't need to talk about season 7 and 8.
No one wants to talk about season 7 and 8.
No one wants to talk about that. So it was entertaining. I'd probably give it like a 6 out of 10 right now. There's a couple things that just because Wheel of Time has been around for a really long time, I do know a little bit about it, and the little bit I know is like the 4 main characters from Two Rivers. Rand, Egwene, Perrin, and Matt. Like they're supposed to be like the main characters or something like that. And I didn't like any of them.
Yeah, well,
Like not a single one of them that I like did not care. Anytime they were on screen, I'm like, let's get back to the people that I care about, please.
who were the people you cared about?
So, I mean, Moraine is awesome. You know, I really liked, I think Thom was his name. Tom?
You're saying Tom Maryland, the like guitar guy.
Yeah, the bard
Yeah,
dude. They
sorry,
like
the
ran,
Bard. I got confused.
yeah,
I was thinking Tam. Yeah, Tom Maryland, the
yeah.
Bard.
Yeah, they like ran into the bard in that one town, and he seemed cool, and then he was gone in like 5 minutes, and I'm
I'm
like,
going to
all right,
be
well,
so interested what you think about Tom Maryland in the book because they are very different.
oh, are they? Okay.
Very different. I will say that. So I'm going to be very curious when you read it. What
Yeah.
you think?
What's his name? The Moraine's guardian.
Lan.
Lan was interesting. Little like, quiet, stoic sort of type, but he was interesting enough of a character. He had like enough screen time and sort of dimension as the show went on. You kind of saw a little bit more of him, so that was sort of interesting.
That's interesting that you use the word stoic for Lan because people felt like he wasn't stoic enough in the show, book readers, but you still got that he was supposed to be stoic.
Yeah, well, here's the problem. You compare him to the rest of the cast, and like he's the most stoic of the cast. And yeah, who else did I can't remember her name, but the Red Aes Sedai.
Oh, Leandrin.
Leandrin. I thought she was very captivating anytime she was on screen, and I was very interested in what she was doing. In fact, I actually probably would have loved 8 episodes all taking place at the White Tower to sort of learn about all of the politicking that's happening with the Aes Sedai. Like that was probably the most intriguing part of the show.
So episodes like 5 and 6 were the ones that you liked the most then? The ones where they're
Yeah.
at the White Tower?
Yeah, I'd probably say that.
That's so funny.
And Logain, the false dragon.
Oh.
I was very I wanted more of him. Like he should have been, I feel like the first season bad guy.
Okay.
Because I thought the episode 8 just landed flat. I did not like how it ended.
Book readers agree with you. We all hated episode 8. We all thought it was terrible.
It didn't really make me. I mean, I know there's a lot that, given the series is like what, 13 books, something like that.
14
books. So there's a lot that you're probably not supposed to know around book 1, which I think this season takes place, all through book 1.
In book 1.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was just, there was not, I don't think, enough information to really understand, one, what was really going on, who the Dark One was. It didn't really make too much sense what Rand did against the Dark One. I mean, I don't know, it didn't really make too much sense to me. So it was kind of confusing. I'm just like, yeah, okay, cool. He, shot some magic at him, and then it was over like that. So.
Yep. How did you feel about Rand being the dragon?
I mean, it was pretty obvious that was what it was.
Okay. When did you know? When did you know then?
I mean, probably episode 1.
Okay. So what you're saying is their whole who's the dragon fell flat. It didn't matter.
No,
okay. Okay. Book readers also hated that. So it's interesting when it didn't also work for
real quick. Can we talk real quick about episode 1 and Perrin? So I didn't really like any of the 4 characters this so far, but the one thing that just feels like they did dirty to just a character in general is Perrin. So when I watched the first episode, I thought Perrin's wife was pregnant, just the way that they
I think she was
really early. I don't think they ever mentioned it, but I very much just the way
she was touching her stomach.
Exactly, right. So that was sort of like, I'm like, all right, I'm a dad.
Brandon just had a baby. He's on paternity leave. This is why he's doing this for me.
But yeah, I mean, he, to me, it was like, okay, cool. His wife is pregnant. And then he goes and kills his wife. And to me, unborn child, that would just I don't know anybody who would have the will to go on at that point. If a normal,
so what you're saying is you wouldn't
person would have done that and then done suicide by whatever the Trollocs were that were invading. Just walk out and just let one take it, sort of thing.
So what you're saying is you felt like it might have been really out of place when Perrin all of a sudden was talking about liking Egwene like a month after killing his wife and unborn child.
That love triangle made no sense. Like, it just seemed
Okay.
like we're just gonna throw teenage fantasy, like, little softball in here, and it didn't really fit in, and it had no impact on and bearing on any of the story and what actually like panned out. So it just sort of felt shoehorned in there a little bit.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Again, it's very interesting to me that that matches how book readers feel because that doesn't happen in the book. I will give you that spoiler.
Okay.
Just because Perrin is not married, his wife
Then
doesn't
why,
exist,
then why
so
even give him a wife who dies in the
to
first
kill
season?
her.
I don't get
Yeah,
it.
so it's interesting that it didn't work, and I think maybe like you said, like they just didn't have the emotional follow through. Like if you really did that, you shouldn't be like, okay, time to go on an adventure.
Yeah,
I don't know. Anyway,
yeah.
so that's interesting. That's one of the things you didn't like. You liked the Aes Sedai stuff the most, so you'd be hoping that next season is like a more focus on Moraine and Leandrin and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and also the White Cloaks. Like the White Cloaks were really
Mm.
intriguing, just because it's like this opposing faction to the White Tower and the Aes Sedai. So I can sort of see that there's some interesting back and forth politically, and maybe even like wars are sort of waged between the two groups. It wasn't really clear to me why the White Cloaks disliked the Aes Sedai so much, and why
Mm.
they were basically out trying to kill all of them. And it also, the reverse of that, it doesn't really make very much sense that the White Cloaks are sort of literally traveling right outside where the White Tower is, and the White Tower with all the Aes Sedai in it are like, now we're cool with these White Cloaks just sort of like trudging along outside of our city. Because that was sort of when Perrin and Egwene got captured, was like they could see the White Tower, and then the White Cloaks captured them. And it just that also seems sort of like time wise and distance wise, like why would the Aes Sedai sort of allow for this faction of people that literally brutally murders all of members of their society? It just didn't really make too much sense. But the fact that there's this sort of opposing faction to the Aes Sedai was very interesting to me.
Yeah, okay, that's very interesting. I'm gonna once you read it, I'm gonna be curious how you change because does it make you nervous at all that the first book is from Rand's perspective?
Wait, the first book's from Rand's perspective?
Correct.
Well, if it's anything like the books, I'd probably not like it at all then. Or sorry, if
The
it's anything like
show.
the show,
Who
then I
did
wouldn't
you
like it at
think
all.
the books was going to be perspective? Like, who did you think was going to be the perspective of the book?
I mean, like, it makes sense, given, like I said, the little bit I know is that, hey, the four of them are like the main characters, sort of.
You
So
hoped it was Moraine.
I mean, yeah. It should just be Moraine the entire show.
Yeah, that's interesting. Was there anything you, other than like some of the things you've mentioned, was there anything you were confused about? Like any big lore or magic things during the show that didn't make sense?
So lore wise, they never really explain like this is also probably will get explained later on, but like why do men go crazy when they
Mm.
use the one power? Because then there was like the flashback in episode 8 where, oh, surprise, there's a whole bunch of men who use the one power all the time. I think there was some throwaway line they used that sort of explained that something that the dragon did like 3,000 years ago caused something to happen to all the men, but it wasn't really fleshed out very much.
Yeah, okay. That's another interesting point. I won't say any more since you're going to read it, but yeah, that's interesting. Okay.
And the one thing that was made me scratch my head a little bit was there was the ogre from the city that just like all of a sudden started like following them around like a lost puppy dog, and I'm like, okay, why is he here?
Did you care when he died?
I couldn't have even told you he died.
He gets stabbed in like the last season, last episode.
I could not. I did not remember that.
Okay.
So
If
no,
you
I did
had,
not care.
you did not care. Okay, perfect. That's all we need. You didn't care. Okay, that's all we need to know. I was gonna say of all the four main characters, well, I guess five: Nynaeve, Egwene, Perrin, Matt, and Rand. Which one did you find the most interesting, if you had to choose?
Oh, that's true. Nynaeve was probably the most interesting of the five of them.
The most fleshed out, for sure.
Yeah,
in the
oh yeah,
show.
yeah. Because they showed she had a lot more, I think, screen time with Lan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was a little bit more sort of backstory to her, and her little bit of distrust of the Aes Sedai because of the way that her master was treated, and things like that. They actually like sort of put in a little bit of that, and it feels like the other four of them there was like literally no backstory, except for I guess at the very end, Rand got a little bit of backstory fleshed out, where his dad's not actually his dad. We don't actually know who his parents are, which was an an interesting little
Reveal.
reveal. Yeah.
How did you feel about Lan and Nynaeve having a romantic relationship? This is just a contested thing within the fandom, so I'm going to ask you as just a show watcher.
I don't know.
You don't care.
I don't really care. I mean, it's interesting. I think maybe they showed all of the land. What do they call the
Warder?
ward?
Yeah, warders.
The warders. So all the other warders, it seemed like, had romantic relationships with their Aes Sedai. So I think maybe it was. I was like, okay, is this okay for him to have a romantic relationship with somebody other than his Aes Sedai? Probably the most interesting relationship, like romantic relationship in the series.
Although you did text me and say that you really liked Moraine and Swan.
Oh, I did. Yeah, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, you really liked that. So that was funny because you had texted me. People who are probably watching this know that I had a meltdown over that because that's not in the books. And so then you texted me the same night being like, wow, I love this Moraine and Swan. And I was like, okay, I got to see this from an outsider's perspective.
Well, so the thing that I really, really liked about that was, I mean, it sort of shows this, it's a little bit of this, I think, forbidden romance a little bit, because, there's a superior in some way, shape, or form, right?
Yeah, she's definitely a superior.
And it sort of alluded like they've been planning something for, decades or whatever at this point. But yeah, I don't know what they're going to do since, Moraine's banished or whatever, magically banished for a long time. So I don't know how that's going to work, but that was interesting.
It's just interesting that you like that. It made me feel more, I got on board with it. I was like, okay, fine. Yeah. I guess if people are really loving it, okay, I get it. I can see how it's nice.
The one thing, like I said, I would have preferred, I think, all 8 episodes just taking place at the White Tower, because there was so much that I'm like, well, this relationship with Moraine and the Tamerlane seat would have been really cool to have fleshed out a little bit more than just in a single episode.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it will next season, maybe. I don't really know.
Yeah, I mean, I have. Here's the one thing: at the very end of the episode 8, I have no idea where they're going in what direction the show could even go. So,
that was one of my complaints. Like, you have no idea, right? You have no idea where the characters. There's like no setup for where the characters.
No, yeah, there was very little setup on what's happening. All you know is, I think, Rand's going off into who knows where. Matt disappeared and is evil or something, and they need to go figure that out. I guess there's a little bit of setup. There was the traveling salesman guy, like, showed up at the city and basically slaughtered everybody and stole.
Okay, so you recognized him, because some people haven't known who he was. So you did know that it was the traveling salesman.
Oh yeah, I mean, I recognized him a couple episodes before. I think when they went out of the way, it showed him following them out of the way. So he'd been following them or something for a while. It seemed like. Obviously, he has some agenda going on that will probably get fleshed out later. I guess there's also a little bit of setup with there's some random people on ships that like summon a tidal wave or something.
What did you think about that scene? We should ask about that.
I mean, it was cool. I think in episode 1, when Moraine's using the one power, it was a little hokey to me a little bit. I do think it got a little bit better as the show went on, except for Nynaeve at the end with those couple people standing outside of the city.
When they all were like together.
It's just a little hokey. It just felt very felt a little like Dragon Ball Z, like, Goku summoning Spirit Bomb for 5 episodes. It's sort of what it felt like. I'm like, all right, come on.
It's a good reference. Maybe if I can find a good clip, I'll put that there as you say that. We can connect it. Okay, that was cool. That was interesting. Your perspective is very interesting, very different from a book reader's, which was like sort of the point. I'm going to be very curious after. I'm going to have to ask you like what you preferred. Since you watched the show first, you may prefer it to the book, so that will be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so I watched Game of Thrones, and I started reading, I think, the first one, and then I found that the last one is probably never going to get read or written. So then I stopped reading them.
Yeah, well, but this one's
At least
completed, so we're good.
Yeah.
This is
So,
already done, and you have to at least get to the Brandon Sanderson books so that you can say you've read all the Sanderson books. Is there anything else you wanted to say about the show, just in general?
yeah, I mean, I think one thing that I'd like to see is, given that they did introduce a little bit of flashback in the last episode, I think it would be really interesting to see if they can, flesh out a little bit more of what happened with the previous dragon. Um, just because it seems like the world was less. I don't know. It seems like the world had less sort of. I mean, I'm sure it was crazy, but it seemed like there's this interesting dynamic of, oh, hey, now there's men who are also at the White Tower with the Tamerlane seat, and helping each other in some form. So I guess like exploring, right, how is it that men now started going crazy? I don't know. There's a little bit more of those lore threads that I'm sort of looking forward to
figuring out.
Yeah,
and it'll be interesting because if you read the book before the next season, that will be answered. That's something that's answered pretty quick in the book. So I think it's interesting that they have not explored it quite yet in the show. So they'll probably do it next season. I don't really know. But yeah. Well, thank you for coming to talk about the show and your thoughts. And it'll be interesting to see how your opinion changes after I force you to read it now.
Yeah. Now the real question is: do you force me to read it now, or do I wait until the show keeps coming out with more seasons?
No, you got to read it before the next season.
No.
You can't wait. You might. It's nothing. It's nothing. It's like the size. It's not even the size of a Stormlight Archive. It's fine. Okay. Well, thank you.
Of course.
Okay. Hello. I'm with AJ, who is my BookTube, Bookstagram friend. We met online. If you've watched a lot of my videos, you may remember that I read all of the SPFBO winners with AJ, and we are currently reading all the Hugos. And I invited AJ because when did you read The Wheel of Time or Eye of the Worlds?
So it was after episode 4, just before episode 5, I started to read it.
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting that you read it halfway through the season. Yeah. And I guess I should say before we get into this, AJ reads a ton of fantasy. You read a lot of fantasy.
Yeah.
Yes, you read a lot of fantasy. And we also have very, very, very similar tastes in fantasy. So I just think it was interesting, someone who watched some of the show before reading. Now, what made you decide to go and read it, really?
So probably my initial reaction to the show, spoilers maybe for a future.
This is a full spoiler live. Yeah, it's fine.
I mean, just for my future reactions. But I guess they weren't great, mediocre. And I guess I saw some of the discussion around the changes to the book and just the general fan reaction. I think initially, obviously the hardcore fans were probably the first to respond, and it was overwhelmingly quite negative, I would say. And that made me interested because probably another relevant thing to this discussion is I am very interested in narrative and storytelling generally. I am quite analytical, probably more than the average reader or watcher. So I just wanted to see what the differences were, what everyone was talking about, so I could have my own opinion, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So, because you had told me when we were messaging earlier that you started after episode 4 and then you finished before episode 6 or after episode 6?
Just before episode 6, yeah.
Just before episode 6. Okay. So like the most obvious question is, did you like the book or the show better? And it's okay if it's a mixture.
Yeah, I think I found the book a lot less frustrating. So the book, I would say,
is better.
Yeah, for sure. Which is probably just generally not an unpopular opinion with adaptations in general. It's probably not that controversial to say. And while the book didn't blow me away, it's not like a new favorite. I just found it, I guess, a lot more consistent as a whole.
So yeah, in those first 4 episodes, then before you read it,
Mhm.
just tell me, like, what were the positives, what were the negatives? And wait, I actually have a question. Do you watch a lot of fantasy, like TV or movies?
I do, yes. I've
Okay.
probably watched most of the major ones. There are some like ones on Netflix, some smaller ones that I haven't watched, but generally, yeah, I'd say I'm pretty well acquainted with the canon.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was just curious.
So my initial reaction, I think it was quite underwhelmed, quite negative. I think I bombarded you with a
You
lot of
did.
voice time at the time. There are definitely some positive aspects, and although I have some issues with the production and the visual aspect, I think as a whole in that initial first 4 episodes was quite strong. It didn't look terrible, although there are weak points. Generally, the production value, the acting, all of that was pretty good, I would say. I found there to be a lot of things that frustrated me with the writing, I guess, which is the problem that I have overall with the series. That's what really got me frustrated. Just some of the decisions and choices that were made, even not knowing the canon source material, I just found it to be a bit weak.
Yeah, I remember in those voice messages you were saying it felt too average. Like you didn't feel like it was really doing anything new.
Yeah, I don't think this season 1 of Game of Thrones hasn't really pushed the bar forward or raised the bar. And I know a lot of people get quite frustrated when it's compared to things like Game of Thrones, but Game of Thrones basically paved the way for Wheel of Time and future fantasy shows, right? So for me, it's not that it has to be like tonally similar to Game of Thrones, but when these studios are funding these big fantasy epics, it's because they want to replicate Game of Thrones' success in pop culture. So it doesn't have to be the same tone, plot, whatever, but they want it to be as popular as Game of Thrones. And I don't think Series 1 captures or does anything to really capture the attention that Game of Thrones did. Like the way Game of Thrones season 1 ended is something that I think for the average watcher quite excited them, because a major character dies and it's not something that you normally see. And so that built up excitement for people to go and tell everyone to watch the show. Oh my God, the ending, you watch it, watch it. Whereas we had a similar thing at the end of Wheel of Time. A major character did die, but they actually followed the trope that we see a lot of times in these sorts of stories where they were brought back instantly. So,
well, and the interesting thing is, even though it would have made book readers mad because Nynaeve, spoiler, she's in a lot of the books,
sure.
I think it would have been a better decision just to at least kill her through the end of season 1. Like if you're going to bring her back, wait to the beginning of season 2. And I think you brought up a good point, because of all the friends I've talked to who haven't read the book and were enjoying the show, almost universally, those friends didn't like episode 8. They tell me like it was fine, but it was anticlimactic. And so it's interesting that you bring up Game of Thrones, which I haven't watched for people who don't know. But when something ends really well, people are going to tell you to start it more. Like there's more of a chance to be like, you have to watch it because you won't believe what happens. And I don't think Wheel of Time, from just a show perspective, ignoring the book, succeeded on that. Like even if I wasn't a book fan.
Yeah. I just think it was quite weak. And again, it comes back to that writing. There were just some decisions made that, I mean, this stems to a further problem. I know, like they had to alter the show drastically regardless because of Amazon's decision up front to only say, right, 8 seasons, 8 episodes.
And Matt leaving midway through.
Yes.
Obviously.
Yeah. So when I talk negative of the show or have issues with the show, I really don't count like Matt's leaving as such. Obviously, they had to redo and refilm, so it does alter it. But like the way Matt left, I know some people like find it bizarre, where people are just like calling his name and he's just standing there. And I get it; it's not great, but I don't like think that ruins the show because I understand that they had to.
They didn't have a choice. Like I'm not going to hold it against them. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, okay, whatever.
Yeah. But overall, and for me, it's not even in the last episode. I think it personally culminates in the last episode because it's all building to that. So I guess that's the clearest point of it. But there are just
So give me some
strange
examples.
decisions.
Give me like, what are the biggest strange decisions? Like if you gave me the top 3 decisions, especially before you read the book, what about in the first 4 episodes that you were just like, eh?
Yeah. I mean, the one that obviously garners the most attention is Perrin's storyline, right? When I watched episode 1, my reaction to it, I did think him killing his wife was quite dramatic. Again, I had no reference to the source material. I didn't know what was in the book and what wasn't. And although I think that battle of the two rivers, Emmonsfield, was quite overly long, that beat in it where he killed his wife was very dramatic, and it worked in the way that I think it's meant to. Because for me, as the average viewer, it did make me go, oh, okay, it made me take notice. And I really enjoyed it because I thought, oh, we're going to get some real drama from this. Like, it's going to be deep. There's going to be emotional scenes. There's going to be like conflict and intense emotion. And that just didn't happen. It vanished. It completely vanished. And I think the climax of it, I'm not sure if it's episode 4 or episode 5, but I think the climax of that storyline comes 4 or 5, where him and Egwene are captured, and she basically tells him, you know, it might take you the rest of your life, but you'll forgive yourself. And then that's it. And it lasted 40 seconds. It lasted less than a minute. And that was the climax of that arc of killing his wife. It's like, what?
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, even as a book reader, I struggled with the parent wife thing, but I did say in my video, like, they could convince me though. Like, it wasn't a change that they couldn't convince me about, because I saw a way where this was going to up the drama, up Perrin's storyline. But like, I think the whole show had problem with follow through, because if you're going to do something like that, you have to let it affect the rest of your season. And it ends up feeling random. So it's interesting. Well, it's interesting because you liked it in the beginning, then didn't, but then you read the book. So I don't know if that influenced how you felt about it.
I mean, it did in a way, because I didn't understand why it was included. And obviously through external sources and interviews and people like Brandon Sanderson, obviously for some reason they thought it externalized Perrin's arc. But it really didn't, because they didn't do anything with it. It was just pointless. I don't see why they had to make that change, because they didn't develop it over the story. Like, they could have not had that in there and still had him having the same emotions, and I wouldn't have been confused.
Yeah, I agree. Because I mean, his town got attacked. He had the emotions of like, my town got attacked, not necessarily that I personally killed my wife.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's interesting, because some people have been complaining that we've been too critical, and that, well, they have all these other seasons to do an arc. But for me, I think there's some things you have to pay off on within the same season. And I think that is one of them that at least we had to have movement on, even if it wasn't solved.
Yeah, for sure. Like, every season, although it doesn't conclude the story, should have some sort of narrative cohesion and want you to, like, excited to see what comes next. The climax of Perrin's arc, I mean, it's hard because obviously they've changed it, but the climax of the arc in this season should have been him with the wolves, right? Him
absolutely
being one with the wolves and embracing it, or something like that.
Or at least recognizing why they're following him. Like, it was weird to introduce that thread and then we never get it. That was with my corrections of season or episode 8. That was my suggestion, that the wolves should have showed up in episode 8. We should have seen them as a part of the battle at some point.
For sure. Yeah.
Or helping them escape the White Cloaks, which is what's in the book. You know, there was just a lot of missed opportunities, I think.
Yeah. I mean, we got it's just strange, because it doesn't develop, and it doesn't develop with his friends. Like, why is it not talked about more? This weird thing that's happening with him, and the same with his wife. Like, he's got, like, I know Matt disappeared, but he's got Rand there. Why is he not talking to his best friend about murdering his wife? What? Like, instead they're arguing about Egwene. What?
Yeah, we can't even talk about that here. It's out of nowhere. I do think, like, he probably wouldn't have maybe admitted to murdering his wife, but you would think he'd be talking about his wife dying at least. Like, you know, it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, once he reveals it to Egwene, though, right, the cat's out of the bag. So when he next meets Rand, Egwene knows.
They would talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting. I You know, I don't. If you can remember, who was the character you were most interested in the show in the first 4 episodes?
Oh, Matt, easily, hands down.
Oh,
Yeah,
Matt. Okay.
yeah,
So, because a
yeah,
lot of people say Moraine, so you were the most interested in Matt.
yeah, yeah. I get it, Moraine. I think like I really liked Rosamund Pike. All the actors basically did well. I have no real criticism of the actors. I think they all did either a good or like, just a good job
Passable.
with what they had.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got no critiques of that, to be honest. And so I don't think Rosamund Pike was like bad in the first few episodes. But I guess as somebody who understands fantasy narrative, I understand like the mentor role, that like
Yeah.
mysterious mentor, like, oh, they've got some powers, oh, we don't know what's going on. I kind of get it. I guess I didn't know what was going on with Matt, and I think he just brought so much personality to that role that was just really interesting to watch. I wanted to see what was going to happen with him. I wanted to see where it was going to go, for me personally.
And what's interesting is like his arc doesn't go very much in the first book. So did it change when you read the book? Did you still like Matt?
So
Matt, you're still most interested. Like once you started reading the book, were you still the most interested in Matt? I guess is my
in the
question.
show or in the book?
In the book, once you read it.
Once I read it, no, I guess it did fade a little bit, just because again, yeah, he isn't as central in this book that I read.
No, his arc, if you continue reading, his arc gets way more interesting in a few books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can only imagine. I say my favorite character from the book. I mean, it's hard because I guess it has to be Rand in a way. Yeah, I would say there's no like I didn't feel as much passion coming off the page for any particular character. Again, I didn't. It's not like I hated them or I thought it was badly done. But yeah, so I guess Rand, just because we spend so much time with him and know so much about him, that it has to be him.
Yeah. And when did you already know that Rand was going to be the Dragon Reborn when you were watching the show? Mm-hmm. That had been spoiled. Okay.
Yeah, it's just everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the hard thing of being a fantasy reader. It's not like you were really going into the show completely blind. I feel like everyone has some sort of idea about Wheel of Time.
Yeah. I think I was aware that Rand was the dragon, and I was aware that there's some aspect of it where he is multiple people, or he has like the power of multiple people, or something like that. I was aware there was that aspect, but I think that's the only thing I really knew.
And so overall, what would you rate the show out of 10, let's say?
Out of 10, like a 6.5.
That's what everyone's saying is the 6 out of 10. Everyone's giving it a 6 who's not super tied to the books. So because, mediocre.
Yeah, like it's really not bad. Like I have a lot of criticisms about it, but that's just because I have such high expectations. If I didn't have the weight of the Wheel of Time behind it, and I just like flicked on the channels, like, oh, what's this? Oh, yeah, I'll watch it. It's like, it's okay. It's passable. Like I'm not offended, but I'm not in love. It's fine.
Are you going to watch the second season?
I was just about to say, would I watch the next season? I mean, yes, I obviously will at least try it because of
everything.
Time. Yeah. If I didn't have that weight, it would not be. I wouldn't be like, oh, episode 1's out, gotta watch it. I would like probably be aware, and maybe I'll put it off. Maybe I'll watch it in like 6 months or whatever. I wouldn't rush to it, basically.
Yeah, I think it is. For better or worse, it's relying a lot on the name Wheel of Time for people to tune in. Because I think the same way. I feel like if I didn't know anything about Wheel of Time, which is hard to imagine, I feel like I would have been entertained by the show, but like you said, not like dying to know when the next season came out. I'd probably just like, I enjoyed it. It was fine. But yeah, I don't think I would feel super.
Yeah, it's just insane that there was such a limit put on the show from the outset, and then the decisions made with that limit were just baffling. And that's the thing. I'm like, again, I come into it not attached to the lore or the canon of the show necessarily, so I wasn't against changes, and I understand that they have this limit so that there's going to be changes because they need to fit things in, and like maybe it doesn't really make sense with the story now, but when it comes off in the end, you'll be like, okay, yeah, I get it. But the problem is, there are so many plot holes, so many like inconsistencies, so many mistakes. It doesn't make me feel like I'm in the hands of a master storyteller that's going to make it all pay off. It makes me feel like, do they know what's going on right now? Are they just flying by the seat of their pants pulling this together? Because it feels like it at times.
Yeah, and that was my major complaint, which made some people mad. Is like, my complaint really wasn't that they changed the book. My complaint was that the changes feel random. They don't feel like they're going towards any purpose. And I feel like when you have, I mean, as a big fantasy reader, like, fantasies work under very specific rules. That's how they're going to work, except for a few. But like a lot of these epics, like, they have rules that pay off later, and if you just ignore them, then things get.
Yeah.
And can you imagine a Sanderson being adapted without paying attention to the rules of the magic systems? It would be a disaster.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just insane, and that's the thing. There's no clear identification of like cost and what people can do, and sometimes, like, with the changing of the law, I don't know, like, one of the issues, like small quibbles, I guess, in the whole thing of it is the scene with is it Aiel, Rand's mother? When she's fighting, and people are like, oh, she has her veil up, she has her veil down, and blah, 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 blah. And I get that in the book they always have their veil up when they fight, and in this they had their veil down. A lot of people saying, oh, well, she didn't have time, blah blah blah. But when you watch the behind the scenes of that episode and the director talking about that scene, the reason they wanted her veil down is because they wanted to see the actress's face. And for me, I feel that is just so weak in terms of building.
I actually didn't know that. I didn't know that was the reason.
Yeah. He says they wanted.
I'm the one who's been like, oh, she just didn't have time. She's in labor, so you can't ruin this for me. That's like the one scene I like, AJ. You can't take away the scenes I like. Okay, stop it.
I'm sorry, but that speaks to me of like why would you like disrespect the established, detailed world building and lore to see this person's face? We all know what a woman in labor looks like. Do you think we can't tell from her eyes when she's like grimacing? Like, we get it. But if she took her veil down, she thinks she's safe, and then somebody comes and she, instead of reaching for her sword, she chooses to put up her veil. In the process of doing that, she gets wounded, fatally wounded.
It tells so much more.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, why did she do that? It builds suspense, it builds mystery, it builds the world. But instead, it was just like, oh, we want to see her face. It's like, what? Like,
yeah, and you're bringing up a lot of good points, because there's the smallest moments like that tell so much. Because like you said, if she had chosen to put her veil up instead of reach for a sword and then get injured because of it, that already tells you so much about the AL's personalities, their culture, who they are. And I do think they had a lot of wasted opportunity of, like, they acted like, well, it's too hard because we have only 8 episodes, but like, there's small millisecond decisions that can say a lot about a character.
Exactly.
I do think we missed that a lot in the show.
It's just it's just strange where they choose to put their focus. And again, another common complaint is around, I think it is episode 4, the water episode, which is not a bad episode.
I think it's 5 and 6. I think they're 5 and 6 as the water episodes.
A lot of people say like it's their favorite episode. Like, and I get it. It's not necessarily a bad episode, but in the context of the show and the time that they have, it's strange to just inject that not book storyline when you have so little time. Like, why did you choose to do that?
Or if you're going to inject it, make every scene count for more. Because I did say that in the one particularly where Stepan dies, that a lot of the scenes establish the same character beats. So for me, if you only have 8 episodes, you want to make sure every scene is establishing a different character beat. And so I think, it's interesting. Rafe hasn't ever adapted anything before, and I wonder if, that's been a struggle, understanding that, like, how much time.
Yeah, I mean, it's just strange. I mean, obviously Amazon signed off of it, and Harriet, the Wheel of Time
estate,
that's the word I was looking for. The Wheel of Time estate signed off on it, so they were happy with it. And him to lead it, he must have shown a lot of passion for it. It's just strange. It's just very strange.
Yeah, and I've said before, I don't know Rafe says he's a fan. Fine, that's great. Just because you're a fan of something doesn't mean you'd be good at adapting it. I would never claim I'd be good at adapting something. I don't know enough about film. I think I could be a good editor. I could tell people if that was a bad idea, but I couldn't write it myself.
Yeah,
and I just wonder, I don't know. It's just going to be interesting going forward. I don't, like you said, you're going to probably watch season 2. I think that's going to be the make or break it. I don't think it's broken at this point. I think if they came with a super strong season 2, in my opinion, it could turn around.
Yeah. So I think when I initially was spamming you with messages in the first 3 episodes, I think my prediction was that it wouldn't make it past season 3.
A lot of people have predicted that.
Yeah, or at least the hype train will stop, and that will be like the death knell of it. And at the moment, I still feel it true. And the issue I have with hope for future seasons is they'd already started filming when this was coming out. So all this backlash, that out. So they can't be like, okay, right, we've got to tool up right now. We've got to do better next season. It's like they've already done it. They're continuing the train that's already started rolling. So I don't know.
Someone told me that last week. They're like, oh, but season 2 has already started filming before season 1 was done. And that kind of nailed the coffin of hope closed for me. I was feeling very hopeful. And that was like, well, how are they going to change anything?
Yeah, exactly. And
Rafe seems pretty... All the interviews I've read of Rafe, he feels very in love with what he did. He doesn't really say that he wishes he changed. So
yeah, I mean, I get that. I mean, you can't really come out and say that. It would basically kill the show.
That's true.
Another issue.
But you could not double down. He doubled down on the parent Egwene love triangle.
Yeah.
You don't have to say you didn't like it, but you don't have to double down and say you're going to keep doing it, even though book fans didn't like it.
Yeah, it's a bit defensive. There was a lot going on there, and the thing
I get
is,
it. You should be defensive. Some of the Wheel of Time fans are being rude. I'm gonna go out and say it. Some people are being so rude about it, and we don't need that. Yeah.
There's no room for specifically hating individuals. It's just a TV show at the end of the day. But anyway, without getting into that side of things, I also worry for season 2 because there's obviously a big change coming. Well, as far as I'm aware, I could be wrong, or at least very heavily moved forward storyline for Moraine. So because it's just so not the book, I just think a lot of people are just going to really not. Oh, my computer's just come on. A lot of people are really not going to be happy.
Yeah, my biggest question is going to be if there's going to be a point where it's too hard to say all the differences. Are we going to diverge enough at some point where it will not be possible for me to say the changes that are happening without explaining the plot of an entire book? So it'll be interesting going forward. There's a way that this whole Moraine, either tied off shield or stilling, gets resolved quickly. It's going to be interesting. I'm
not sure. I wouldn't even want to comment on where they're going to go with it, just because who knows at this point. But it's just unfortunate. Again, I don't want to rehash every little plot hole mistake, because there's, people know where to find that sort of video, and we don't need to repeat it. But the end scene of season 1, with the I don't know, the new people. I can't remember who that. I don't actually know who they are. Sanshan, yeah. Just that whole scene, why? Did nobody think why is there nothing there? It's just bizarre.
And again, it has nothing to do with the book. It has nothing to do with that. It's just why would they be expending power for an empty coastline?
Yeah, it just feels rushed in the script. It feels rushed in the script. A bit of dodgy CGI, and I guess they get a COVID pass. I'll give it to them.
I think I was maybe one of the only people who didn't mind the Shashan last scene. I liked the idea of that being a closing scene. We introduced something new. Yeah. A lot of people just didn't like it at all. But I liked the idea of it. I hated the execution of it.
100%. Yeah, I have nothing against the scene in isolation, but why? I shouldn't have that big of a question. My reaction to it should be, oh, what? Intrigue, mystery, excitement. Instead, I'm like, what? What are they doing?
I feel like I need to make you read The Great Hunt, because They are a very cool part of The Great Hunt.
I will. Yeah, I do plan to continue the books.
Oh, you plan on it? Okay, good. We can talk after. Anyway, okay. Thank you. That was super interesting. I think your thoughts overall is like had story writing problems separate from the book. You enjoyed the book more, which most of my watchers will be pleased to hear. So that's good, I guess. Anyway, thank you for telling us your thoughts.
No problem. I will happily rant anytime.
Good. We can do it after season 2 again. If we make it through season 2, we'll find out. And then the next clip is what my brother-in-law sent me about the show. Instead of interviewing him, he just answered a few questions for me.
Hi, my name's Adam. I watched Wheel of Time. I've never read any of the books. I know nothing about the history and storyline, so I'm a big noob, you could say. We're always very optimistic about new fantasy shows. We want to try them out and give them a shot. This is me and my wife, but I enjoy most of my fantasies video games. I'm playing Horizon Zero Dawn right now. I know I'm really behind on that. It's been incredible. I'm really, really into it. And even indie games like Celeste. I feel like video games are bringing so much rich stories, and they never have the drama, cheesy, soap opera nonsense mixed into them at all, which is awesome. I mean, sometimes they do, and it's not like I hate that. It's just sometimes that dominates. Super into fantasy, really want to like Wheel of Time, really like a lot of other sci-fi and fantasy, and then there's some stuff we hate, like we hate The Magicians. We don't really like The Witcher. The Witcher we wanted to like. Anyway, there's all sorts of shows we want to like, but what ends up happening is we're not there for very long. And so if in the 45 minutes you gave us like 25 or 30 minutes of filler and we're there to watch some fantasy or hear a fantasy story, we're out. We want to see you do something interesting with the time there. Not that we're waiting for like a story to be delivered quickly. It's more like we're just like, what are you picking and why? So with Wheel of Time, we're kind of barely hanging in there. The ratio of scenes that are awesome and episodes that end and we go, gotta watch the next one, is at like a 50% ratio. A good episode will come out and then a slow one that stinks, and then like a good one will come out and then like another one with enough in it that was stinky that we're just like, what are we doing here? We ended up making it through to the end, and I'm not sad that I did that, but I'm not gonna be there watching the next season first episode when it comes out. There was a scene where I pretty much vowed to quit the show. It's the one where Lan is at the other warder's burial, very emotionally charged, and Aes Sedai has lost her warder. Totally get it. The scene was like 6 minutes long, which seems kind of strange for a character we barely knew, but whatever. What happened at the end is Lan, who has been pretty stoic and pretty quiet, rips his shirt open and looks up at the sky and screams in agony. And it is totally out of character and felt really strange to see his pecs when his bro is dead. So that was a really low point for me in the show. And so, yeah, it's not like we don't hate the show. We don't hate any of the characters. I think the acting is fine. It's not superb. But I always like when they take a risk on new actors. All in all, though, we gave it a 6. Could have been better. It had so much potential. This could be an 8 or a 9 show. But we're so frequently given 3s or 4s that we had to give it an average in there. And we thought it was a 6. So just for some reference, we think like Lord of the Rings is a 9 or a 10. His Dark Materials is a 9 or a 10. The Magicians, like I said, is like a 3 or a 2. The Witcher at a 4 or a 5. Like The Witcher, we didn't hang on, and we did hang on with Wheel of Time. So show is a cool premise though. Overall has this RPG vibe, which I really like. Go and find a party, save the world as a group. My favorite character is Loyal. Loved him as soon as he walked in the scene. I just loved the juxtaposition of like super fast mind, high intelligence, but can't really act as fast. It's like time is different for their mind than their body. And that's just really cool. My least favorite character is Rand, who I don't hate, and the acting seems fine. The character itself is fine. His storyline and the upbringing and all sorts of really cool pieces. But there's like this teen angst, soap opera, drama, high schooler, maybe even, junior high schooler vibe to him that just is so cringy. She obviously loves you. Like, you don't have to sit there and push yourself away over and over again. It just seems so childish to do that. It kind of feels like this character is doing that to create tension in various aspects of the story, for the sake of creating tension. Like, it didn't seem natural to Rand to me to have them be that angsty. It just didn't. But I don't know. Maybe I'm projecting on Rand. My least favorite actor, though, is his friend Perrin, who I like Perrin as a character again, but I think just the choices of scenes that they always pick with his face. He's always just so concerned and so confused. No idea. Over and over and over again. It seems like that character is stronger than that. So I feel like the character is stronger than being acted or portrayed, and it just is annoying. But not as annoying as Rand, who would cheesy soap opera comments that were just like, I don't know if you love me. And it's just like the voice plus I don't know, it's just so much of it just felt really cheesy. I was just like, I'm here for a fantasy show, not this. So I'll push through it if I have to. But it looks like Rand is going to go off again and do something all alone, and he's pushing everyone away. Looks to be his MO. So maybe he's the hardest one in the group to bring back to the core in the end, even though he was a heart of it or something. I don't know. I do have 2 predictions, though, that I want to share. Since I know nothing, they're completely off the cuff and just random. The first one is I think Moraine is going to get her magic back. I kind of hope Rand gives it to her. She seems to have worked really hard and done a lot of right stuff to have earned a pretty bad outcome out of this whole thing. So maybe I just like Moraine. I do like Moraine and want to see her rewarded for her hard work. Risen from the ashes. The second prediction I have is that the dragon is going to be a new type of dragon that is the sum of many magicians. Rand and Egwene are going to get together and form a single spell that ends up being the most powerful spell any dragon has cast. But in this case, a dragon is going to be multiple people. There's been a lot of gender kind of competition and comparison about power and strength and all sorts of things, which has been really nice and refreshing to see. But maybe what they're going to end up here is that the competition needs to end and these need to come together in order to form something bigger than themselves, bigger than their own gender's capabilities, maybe, or something. It feels like there's something there on the horizon about that. We'll see.
So I hope you guys found that as interesting as I did. It certainly was extremely enlightening for me. It's very interesting to see how the non-book readers differ from the book readers, but overall I found it fascinating that completely separately, they did not know. They all rated it a 6 out of 10. That seems very interesting. It seems like a lot of the non-book readers feel like the show was just okay. And I know a lot of book readers felt that way too. I know I only felt like it was okay, maybe a 5 out of 10 for me. And so very interesting to see that it really wasn't overwhelmingly successful for any group. I know there's people who love it, so I'm not trying to disparage you if you loved the show. But just in general, from what I'm hearing, it's kind of just okay. But it was interesting to see that everyone was also willing to watch season 2, and we're interesting to see if it would get more exciting, better. I do think a lot is going to ride on season 2. Just from these interviews and from the book readers I've talked to, that kind of gets my feeling like they need to knock it out of the park or it's going to just kind of fizzle. So let me know in the comments below what you thought of what everyone had to say. If you're a non-book reader or a book reader, kind of your different opinion, let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you like these kind of videos, please like and subscribe. And if you want to see what I'm currently reading as well as other nerdy rants, you can check me out on Instagram at bookborn.reviews. I'll see you next time. Bye.